What's up, everyone, and welcome to Project XTalk, an Xbox podcast, episode number 144, presented by Save the Game Media. I'm your host, Kevin, and on today's episode, we're talking declining Xbox hardware sales, Ubisoft has canceled another game, and so much more. But I got to introduce my co-host back. He's sticking around, folks. All right, we like him here. JamPackSam, how you doing this week?
What's up, dude? I'm doing very well. I think this is episode number 3, if I'm keeping track properly. Could be 4. I'm not really sure. Time is irrelevant at this point. I don't know.
It's a
But
circle.
yeah, time is a flat circle. But yeah, man, I'm doing good. I played a ton of games this week after
Ooh.
kind of falling off of the gaming wagon with getting just busy with summer and life and stuff. But yeah, had an awesome week. So happy to be back to discuss some gaming news.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear about what you've been playing. It's I've only actually played one game this week, so stark contrast to me going on. But I'm quite busy this week with just trying to going on vacation tomorrow, so I had a lot of planning, and then I had a double header soccer game on Monday, so I was out for hours, and like my body is just dead right now. Like I'm still in pain from 2 days ago, or it's crazy. I'm having a busy week, but I'm glad to hear you're having some time for gaming. I know you've been super busy, so we're reversing roles this week. But
Yeah, we're kind of trading off. Was it very hot when you were playing these soccer games?
oh yes, it's just constant humidity in New
Nice.
York
Yeah.
now. I don't know if this is climate change or whatever we like to you could call it, but it's 100% humidity, 90 degrees all summer this year. So that's all
Yeah.
we get.
In North Carolina today, it was, I think the high today was 97 with a real feel of
Oof.
105, I think is
Oh.
what it was. And so I haven't gone outside. I went to the gym downstairs, but I certainly have not gone outside. I'll tell you that much.
That's crazy. I often say anything above like 80 to me is oppressive. So
Yeah.
you're pushing into territory where I'm like I'm closing it. Shut the society down. All right.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
too hot.
good. Yeah. It's too hot to do much of anything.
Well, if you're new here, this is an Xbox podcast. We're usually live every Thursday right here on YouTube, where we're doing it a day early because I'm going on vacation. But if you can't catch us live, we post every Friday morning on your favorite audio platform of choice. So while you're over there, please drop us that 5-star review. That's Apple, Spotify. It'll also enter you into our Starfield giveaway. We are approaching 100 total reviews across those platforms. So if you can help us get to that 100 reviews, that would be awesome. And you could win yourself the $100 premium digital edition of Starfield. Let you play 5 days early. Just show me that you rated us on either platform or subscribe to the YouTube on youtube.com/save the game media, and you can get a bunch of entries. All right, I'm giving them away. All right, it's very simple. Just show me that you've done it. Twitter or Discord. Speaking of Discord, the link is down below if you want to show me that, or just come hang out and chat with us. If you want to support us further and get early access to Save the Game Media content and exclusive bonus post shows, head over to patreon.com/save the game media. Choose the tier that's right for you, like our current Patreon supporters. So thank you to Bucky Blue, Fabulous Brianna, Brianna's mom, Brianna's brother, Brianna's wife, Nikolai at Night, Cypher Primus, Brendan Myers, Marcus O'Neill, Lillian, Mimi J, The Snack Network, David Hotright, Dave Harp, the Xbox Expansion Pass, and Alpaca Tom. Thank you all for your support. We appreciate each and every one of you. Now that we've got housekeeping out of the way, let's start like we do each and every week, going around the room and asking one question. The question is, what have you been playing, my friend?
Oh, so we'll start off with what I kind of teased last week. I joined the Ubisoft Creators Program, and so they have like a slew of things that run throughout the year as games are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ones that we got to check out a little bit early was the Crew Motorfest closed beta. So not really a behind the scenes look, but we could kind of check it out before the embargo dropped. And so I played about 5 hours of that just to prep for a video that I put out a couple of days ago on my YouTube channel, just to give my thoughts on how the game feels. I am shocked, dude, at how good this game really is.
Oh.
Like when it came out with the Ubisoft Forward a couple of weeks ago, and we saw a little bit more of a deep look into it. It feels like a Forza Horizon copy, like it really is trying to kind of emulate what Forza Horizon brought, but there's enough new stuff in it that makes it entertaining on a different kind of level. Like you've got planes, you've got boats, You've got different types of events that all have a really unique feel and look to them. So really enjoyed my time with that. But I also finished the Wolong Fallen Dynasty Battle of Zhongguan DLC. So I finally wrapped that up, got the 100% trophy on it, or the achievement on it.
Ooh,
Yeah, completely through and through. Just
masochist.
yeah. We finished the DLC. Still more to do collectible wise, but as far as like all battle flags raised, all bosses killed, we are good there. And then in between that, a little bit of Quake Champions. I mentioned on the post show last week that I went to the Southeast Game Exchange and I bought a Scalebreaker statue that's right here next to the Needler. And so now I've been back in the mood for some Quake Champions. So very fun little free to play joint that is great on PC. Very good. Very good.
I've never played any Quake game.
Really?
Yeah, that is something that has eluded me. And I know there were rumors of like its next game is going to be a Quake game, kind of like what they revived Doom, and I'm all for it. Like I actually really enjoy the new Doom games. I've never been historically a Doom guy, but I really enjoyed Eternal and just having a great time with those type of games lately. It's kind of like shut my brain off and just blast some demons. So I'm all for it. But Quake Champions is like the PvP one, right?
Yeah, so it feels a lot like if you played the Doom, I think it was Doom 2016 multiplayer. I think it had a multiplayer mode in it.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I played both the Doom 2016 and the Doom Eternal multiplayer, and it's just that same run and gun. You're just vaulting through tunnels, shooting whatever you might come across kind of thing. It has that same feel to it. But the cool thing is with Xbox Game Pass, you unlock all the champions. Everything is just totally open to you.
Oh.
So there's no real like you can buy a battle pass if you want, but I don't feel strong armed into getting one just since I'm a casual player. But you've got everything open to you. They got BJ Blazkowicz in there. The Doom Slayer is a playable character. Just cool little cameos from other Bethesda
Yeah.
IP that are thrown in there. I'm having a great time with it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've never seen it, so but that's sweet. I love those. We need more of those little crossover like
Yeah.
characters, especially now that we have bringing in a whole new publisher to the Xbox family. But I heard similar things about the Crew Motorfest that you were saying. I heard some people call it Ubisoft's Forza Horizon that they were trying to push there. So I didn't know you were playing that. I know Court Lalonde over at Carpool Gaming was also playing it and had some really good things to say about it. So not my type of game, but it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Is it fully out now?
When does it launch? It is not out right
Okay.
now. I think it launches this fall.
Okay.
Let's see, release date. I just want to verify real quick. September 11th is when it comes out in early
Oh,
access. September the 14th is the full launch. But the way that I said it in my video is like if you really enjoy Forza Horizon and you like that arcadey style open world racing game, this is finally giving Forza Horizon a real run for its money.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Is
so
it
very good.
$70, I imagine?
Yeah, full price game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Cool. 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 So if people like those racing games, check that one out. I only have one thing to talk about this week, Sam, and that is Sonic Frontiers. I told you I was gonna start that after I wrapped up the Dark Picture games I've been playing. I'm about 6 hours in, and I'm about done with the second island so far. And I gotta say, this game is awesome. I really, really like this game. I'm having a good time. I'm not normally the open world gamer, as many that have listened to the show will attest to. That I often slander the open world genre, especially the Ubisoft. But something about the Sonic, putting it in there, being able to just zip around islands at high speed, and like, yes, do the rails look weird, just like floating there random? Like, why is this here? It does. Like the design is a little off at points, but then again, once I hop on them or I figure out like how to get to certain areas, just zipping around and getting through those puzzles is a lot of fun. I'm actually enjoying like collecting all of like whether it's Amy's hearts or right now it's Knuckles medallions and progressing the story. And then you have the the little regular levels. You go to like the thrones and you have to open it with
Hmm.
a gear or whatever, and then you go to like the classic Sonic levels where you're kind of even. They have 2D levels in here, which took me by surprise. I was like, oh, I didn't know we were doing that, but really, really good level design in those. I feel a little dumb playing this game. I don't know if you. I know you have it, right?
Yeah, I've played about 5 hours of it,
Okay.
probably 5 or 6 hours, and then I put it down.
I feel a little dumb sometimes because there are like enemies where I'm not quite sure how to kill them. And then when I look it up, I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like it's either most of the time it's run around them and do your little like sonic trail thing or the
Yeah.
cyclone, or jump on them and then do your ground pound. I'm like, what? Why wouldn't I think of this? Because in my mind, I'm like, just mash the X button or the square button as fast as possible and just
Right.
kick the crap out of them. The first boss, I was like, am I gonna uninstall this game? Because I was getting rage induced because I was like supersonic and fighting this guy, and you have a time limit, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And then I just Googled it, and it was like, oh, I should just use my left trigger move where he just shoots a bunch of stuff and then it depletes the health bar really fast. I spent 45 minutes just getting frustrated at that fight for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of the beauty of some of the game design, where even if it isn't intentionally pushing us, it doesn't just give you the answer to everything. And I think we might have a question about that later on about the ease of some of the games, if I remember correctly. There was one
Mm-hmm.
in the Discord. Um, but with Sonic Frontiers, it's one I need to get back to. It came at a time I got it for Christmas. Some family members gave it to me, and typically with Christmas, that's where like I'm an adult now. I just kind of like load up all the backlog games that I didn't get to through the year that are like $20 on Black Friday. And Sonic Frontiers was one of those. So it's kind of like a stocking stuffer. Like grandma
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know what I like. Yeah, buy Sonic or whatever. So I checked it out. I enjoyed it. I think that for me, it's probably one that I might go back to like later on in the year after Starfield, after everything's kind of gone and I can go back and look at it. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. I think it's one of the most unique Sonic games I've ever seen, where you dive
Mm-hmm.
in and it's just like it, not the world you expect to see Sonic running around in. And also, like you said, where there's just floating rails. I like the fact that they say, why are there rails here? Don't worry about it. Just
Yeah,
get on them. Play the game. Shut up.
do
You know,
Sonic
it's
stuff.
yeah, do Sonic things. But that's awesome, man. I'm glad you're digging it.
Yeah, I worry that the game will lose some of its charm because so you're on the first island, you collect all the Chaos Emeralds. And in my mind, I was like, oh, is it going to be like one Chaos Emerald per island? No, no, no. You got all of them on the first island. So then I was like, okay, what are we doing for the other islands? We go to the second island. He loses all of them on the second island. Now I have to recollect all of them. And I was like, is this what every island is going to be? Like, just
That's annoying.
I help my ghost friend who's trapped in a cyberspace and collect chaos emeralds and then fight the boss, because that could get a little repetitive, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if I think I might have gotten to the second island, but it's so far back I've kind of like lost my memory on it. So as you make your way through, I expect updates on how repetitive the game
Mm,
actually ends up getting.
I will let you know. I planned. It's not very long. My PlayStation says I'm 35% the way done with the main story already, and I'm like
Nice.
6 hours in. So I'll have it. I'll have this beat before Atlas Fallen, which is my goal. But we can get into some news now, Sam. Let's
Let's do it.
jump in there. So, story number one, we have the Xbox Quarter 4 2023 fiscal year financial report. Microsoft has revealed its latest financial results for fiscal year Q4 2023, and it's Microsoft's best fiscal quarter to date, with an overall revenue hitting $56.2 billion, which is an 8% increase. On the gaming side, however, the picture isn't quite as positive. Xbox gaming revenue rose 1%, Xbox content and services were up 5%, while Xbox hardware was down 13%. However, Xbox Game Pass engagement is up 22%. So there is a little offsetting there. But what I want to know, Sam, from this takeaway is, does Xbox have a console sales problem?
I don't think that they have one right now. And I don't even know if console sales would be considered a problem for Microsoft's current approach. I think that the real concern for them would be if the Xbox content and services have been down 13% and Xbox hardware had been stagnant, let's say. I think that with Game Pass being the focus of how they're delivering content and where they're putting their, eggs in that Game Pass basket, I think that the console is just a means to an end. It's just the delivery method for the actual content itself. So I also think that we're in the summer season. It's kind of shocking to me that the Xbox hardware decline follows the spring showcase. I think that's kind of unique in that there was a really big showing of Xbox exclusive games, and yet
Hmm.
people aren't buying the console. Now, potentially, Could be waiting for the jet black or the carbon black Xbox Series S that's coming out in September. Could be waiting for these games to land and see how they actually are. So I think that they're going to have a comeback in the next quarter and the following quarter with the holiday and fall season coming through. But I wouldn't consider it a problem right now in my world.
hmm So I'm a little torn. A decrease of 13% is troubling when you just look at the numbers, right? We know Xbox Series X and S have hit the 21 million mark at least, and we talked about a few weeks ago that PlayStation is nearing 40 million, so they're almost at that 2-to-1 ratio again this generation. When you just take those numbers into effect, it is a little concerning where I'm like, okay, why aren't Xbox consoles selling? Is it simply due to the fact that people still have this perception that Xbox has no games? We know Xbox's showcase, as you were saying, was their most viewed ever, right? It was like 75 million people or something, like some crazy number viewed the Xbox showcase. So, as you were saying, we know that they've got the message out there. So why aren't people picking it up? I'm going to hold judgment for now, whether they have a problem. Uh, I think the quarter that will really determine for me is the quarter that Starfield comes out. If we see Starfield launch and then Xbox console is still down or decreasing and isn't picking up, if especially if Starfield gets good reviews, like if it's as good as we all expect it, it should move consoles in my mind anyway. I know some people play on PC, but this is a Series X and S exclusive. This is the console seller that we've been waiting for. So if we get the financials from that quarter and we're still not seeing some positive growth, then I start to worry, because we go into 2024 with games like Hellblade, games like Avowed, and if Starfield couldn't move the units, are those IPs going to move the units? Because in my mind, and maybe you feel differently, Starfield is a much bigger draw. It's Bethesda's first brand new IP in how many years. As much as I'm excited for Hellblade 2 and Avowed, I don't see the general like gaming public being like, oh, I'm really excited for those two games, because they one was an indie game and then the other is, it kind of looks like Skyrim, but how many people really know about it if they're not in the gaming sphere, right? Like that is that almost a hidden gem, I think, that people will have to discover and get through word of mouth. But Starfield, I think the general gaming public should know about this, because we've been waiting for like a decade about this game at this point. And it's got that Bethesda makers of Starfield. You know, we're going to be seeing that. So I'm waiting to see how it does after that quarter.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point to bring up. I wonder a lot about the Starfield audience and the Bethesda audience in general, because in my mind, if you're looking at the public, not the people that are watching this podcast, not the people that are even watching like IGN or no one that's on YouTube taking in content. Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, people know that name, generally speaking. That's big enough to where people know about it on a cultural level.
Mm-hmm.
But if you introduce a new IP like Starfield, and for some reason in the trailer that's shown or in the announcement that's shown, they don't mention that hey, it's the people that made Skyrim. I don't know how many people are really going to care about the term
Mm.
Starfield outside of our little podcasting space and the general gaming community, the 92 million that tuned in to the Xbox content that was shown off for the Direct, or the Starfield Direct and the Xbox Game Showcase. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how those console sales look, like you said, after the Starfield release. But I think that the real impact is going to be once the Call of Duty marketing deal with
Mm.
PlayStation expires, because you're talking about public eye and what's really going to shift consoles. Even if Call of Duty isn't a exclusive for Xbox specifically, the fact that at the end of the trailer it's going to be an Xbox splash screen, it's going to be green instead of blue, that's what's going to really turn consoles in the long term. And even beyond that, another point that I just thought of about this decline in sales, have the sales so far this generation been inflated because the Xbox Series S has been so readily available that those sales have been skyrocketing just because it's the only box at Target. And
Mm.
now that PlayStation 5 is becoming more available, then people are looking. And since it is such the cultural leader in the gaming space right now, like if you're at the lunchroom table in high school, your friends are probably going to have a PS5. And so if that is the one that you're going to try and get, then the fact that it's there could be shifting the tides a little bit just because it's present on the shelf at this point. So another thing to consider there too.
That's a fair point because when I'm out and about, and this is clearly anecdotal, I've seen Series S everywhere. Series S, I have no problem. Like I can walk into Target right now and get 5 of the bad boys just sitting there. PlayStation 5s, I see at GameStop, and that's really it. They're basically the only retailer around me with PS5s. I've never seen a Series X just sitting around in any store, which is crazy to me, especially because I know Phil said that they've increased the stock. So whether people are waiting to get the Series X, which I think you could just buy online, but I know a lot of people are cautious about buying electronics like that online and getting damaged in transit. But I would like to see where this goes, especially after the new Series S comes out. Does that give it a boost, like with the new terabyte hard drive that they're putting in? Will Starfield, will, as you said, Call of Duty in probably another year, 2025 ish, right? Do we get a giant bump from that and suddenly we see Xbox start gaining ground? Kind of what happened with the 360 and PS3 generation, right? Where people often say, well, Xbox won the generation, but PlayStation did sell more by the end of it because they just went longer with it, right? So we could see something. Do I think they're going to outsell PlayStation? No. Do I think they can close the gap, especially after all of the strides that they're making with Japanese publishers and now the Activision deal? I think it's possible.
Yeah, I think that, here on July 26th of 2023, I'm going to call it that by the end of this generation, it's going to be pretty much 50-50 of where this console sale ends. Just because, I mean, you're looking at these consoles came out in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at a 10-year, let's just say a 10-year console cycle. By the time 2030 rolls around, we're 7 years down. We're talking about where we are right now in the PS4 and Xbox One generation, where a few games are still trickling out. I think at that point, between Call of Duty, another big Blizzard and Activision titles getting those marketing rights, and on top of that, also hopefully these dominoes falling in place of all of these Xbox games finally delivering, and we actually get good content that is exclusive to Xbox. I mean, PlayStation's still going to kill it because they've got great stuff over there. But I think that Xbox could really start to make up a lot of ground, and that'll make a huge impact over the next decade or so.
That's a bold prediction. I would love to see it happen. As we know, most people aren't multi-console households. I think the court documents was like, play if you have a PlayStation 5, you're like 20% of you have a Switch as well. But like if you have a PlayStation and Xbox, it's a pretty small percentage that actually has both those consoles. So I'll love to see how this turns out. But I think the best news here is Xbox Game Pass engagement up 22%. That is good, especially for a quarter that I don't know if what was the strongest in the Xbox Game Pass library. There were some good smaller titles put in. Obviously, Redfall is kind of a disappointment in this category, but like you said, I can only expect this number to go up across the board when you get Starfield and then the big hitters start coming 2024.
Yeah, definitely. I think that you see a lot of third-party games, indie games coming through, and I'm the type that if I recommend somebody get an Xbox of any type, you got to subscribe to Game Pass. Like
Agreed.
that's like it's like if you go to Taco Bell and you don't get Baja Blast. Like they go hand in hand. You got to do it. You're there. You've got to go all out. So yeah, I agree. It's great to see Game Pass continuing to grow, and I don't see my sub stopping anytime soon for Ultimate. So keep on keeping on. I'm looking forward to more games coming.
Game Pass is the Baja Blast for Xbox.
It's
Quote
true.
that. All right. Well, we can move on to story number 2 here, and it's an acquisition, but not from Xbox. Tencent has acquired Techland. Tencent and Techland, the creators of Dying Light, have entered into agreement for Tencent to become the majority shareholder for the company. Techland will retain all ownership of their IPs and creative freedom. So, Sam, how are we feeling? Tencent, obviously, they have their hands in a lot of gaming studios. But latest Techland, the Dying Light devs, getting snatched up.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting approach because Tencent has, for the past 5 years, kind of become one of these big evil megacorps in the gaming space where you see them coming in, swooping in, and either going for a majority stake in something and trying to maintain control over whatever they might be wanting to get control over at that given time. But My exposure to Tencent is primarily through PUBG Corp, where there's a pretty big involvement there. And so, as somebody who used to play PUBG back in like 2018, after Tencent came in, I can't really say there was much of an impact to the
Mm,
strategy outside of what would have already changed had the company just continued to exist. Like they're still doing their own thing. PUBG Mobile came out, still a thing. Um, I think if anything, this will give the team at Techland more leverage to kind of do what they want. Might have a little bit more backing without having to worry about the success of one game or another carrying the company. They'll have that backing of a big owner that can come in and kind of float some money if things, don't go their way or they want to experiment or something. But equally, there's also this liability of like, if things don't go great for Tencent, then they could just chop off the leg to save the body. And then all of a sudden there's layoffs at Techland. So any kind of acquisition comes with risk, like we're seeing with CD Project Red this week, too,
mhm.
where they're laying off some of their staff just because they scaled up too fast.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And Tencent, obviously, a big Chinese company, and I've expressed my concern about their ties to the Chinese government and everything that comes along with that in the past. Censorship. I know. For example, like Guilty Gear Strive, you have to take mentions of Taiwan out of the game because of the ties to the Chinese government. So there is concern for censorship. I do think that in terms of if they are retaining creative freedom, the influx of cash could go a long way for Techland, because Dying Light 1 was a game that I did play for a bit. I never beat it. It was one of those games I played with friends, and just I thought there was promise there. It's a good fun zombie parkour game. It's pretty scary at night if you're into the kind of stuff. Dying Light 2, I think, kind of underperformed from what I think people expected due to some bugs and some glitches and some issues that they had. I know trophies were broken for quite some time on Dying Light 2. I'm not sure if they're even fixed now. And they basically reworked a whole bunch of that game along the way when they were fixing it. So I don't know if Techland has really hit the heights that maybe a lot of people expected them to, but this influx of cash from Tencent, who is a very rich company, who has their hands in things like Sumo Digital. I know they acquired a few years back for like one something $1 billion or whatever. These are studios that can now make games with less risk involved, right? Because they're going to have the backing of a very powerful corporation who is what they're ahead of Microsoft, I think, in terms of game overall gaming revenue, right?
I haven't seen
So
the metrics lately, but I mean, that sounds right for sure.
they were at one point. So Tencent certainly you don't think of them because they're not a platform holder, and this always surprises people. But like they have so many investments in their hands of so many studios that they are making a ton of money in the gaming industry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like Vivendi whenever they were going after Ubisoft, where you're like,
Hmm.
"Who is Vivendi? You're not PlayStation. You're not Xbox. What's going on here?" And it's there are more players in the space than people realize. We're like just because they're not in the headlines every time doesn't mean people aren't throwing cash at this industry to try and make some form of space for themselves by acquisitions, for sure.
And Tencent is pretty smart with who they acquire or who they invest in. They're not Embracer. They're not just gathering up a bunch of studios and like growing to massive size. Like they probably make an acquisition every 6 months or so, and it's always a studio that is like in that double A area. And then they kind of just like, okay, here's money. We're gonna let you continue to make games and just don't go under, don't make something that's like awful. And I think Techland is kind of in that pedigree. I don't know what their next project is after Dying Light 2. I'm not sure if it's Dying Light 3 or a new IP. Like I said, I don't think Dying Light 2 really set the world alight. Like the first one was kind of, it had some buzz, so I think people were excited for it. But I'm more excited to see what they can do now. What do they do going forward?
Yeah, I think that you'll see a ton of support for Dying Light 2, but it's the same situation with Cyberpunk and The Witcher and everything coming out of CD Projekt Red, where what is the other project they'll be working on while they continue to flesh out Dying Light 2? I know they just put out a huge update a couple of weeks ago that fundamentally changed the way that night works, the way that a lot of the big boss style enemies function in the game. So they're continuing to hone in on what that experience looks like. And from what I understand now, it's a really, really good version of Dying Light 2.
Hmm.
But to your point, what's next after this is all said and done? And it sounds like Tencent's going to let them do what they want, so that's always good.
Well, I'm excited to see their next project, but you know what I'm not excited for, Sam?
Tell me.
The Borderlands movie.
Oh, it's happening.
The Borderlands movie finally has a release date, air quotes. The long in production Borderlands movie finally has a release date. Eli Roth's Borderlands film is set to release in just over a year on August 9th, 2024. The film will star Kate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, Jack Black, Jamie Lee Curtis, and more in this adaptation of Gearbox's much beloved franchise. Sam, when I shared this, you seemed a little skeptical about this release date.
Yeah, I'm still not feeling good about it. I mean, you've got a star-studded cast here. That's a lot of money riding on this thing. From what we're hearing, I think that Eli Roth might have wanted his name removed from it, or like one of the directors was using a pseudonym to try and remove himself from the project. That's never a good time when you're talking about an IP like Borderlands and you got the chance to help make a movie for it. And you're like, hey, don't let people know I'm here. Yet, that's just not a good feeling going into it. And you never know how these things are going to work out. It could be a hit. I mean, I'm hearing great things about the Twisted Metal show, which is apparently not bad, shockingly. But yeah, all-star cast right there with, I mean, Jack Black, Jamie Lee Curtis. That's
Mhm.
wild. So we'll see if it hits the release date. I would not put my money on that by any means. I think that's a tall order right there.
I think it's a bold strategy to release, to put out a release date when there's an actor and writer strike currently going on.
Very true.
Most movies are like, hey, if we haven't finished the movie, it's probably like not coming out at the time that we think it's coming out. Like, I think there's some movies coming out the rest of the year. I know Saw X, and then I think the Marvels over in the MCU is coming out, but most of the movies that I think were slated for early next year and this one late next year, I would not count on them hitting those release dates because people just aren't working in the industry, and God knows when this strike is actually going to end. Like we're seeing streaming services be like, we're going to take our streaming exclusive shows and put them on broadcast TV because we have no shows to show in the fall. Like there's nothing going on. So like Miss Marvel's going to NBC or whatever, and then like Yellowstone is going to ABC. It's a mess. This whole thing is a mess. I have no faith in the Borderlands movie already, just because like it's been in production for like 8 years and it's had a ton of issues. Like you said, there was that writer who wanted his name removed. I don't know about the casting choices. I do think David Hotwright in the chat was like all-star cast. I do think that individually these actors are great. Do I think they belong in a Borderlands movie? I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, I think the only one that I am head over heels about with being in this movie is the idea that Jack Black is Claptrap. That keep that no matter what you do, if you completely erase the rest of this movie, keep Jack Black in the role as Claptrap, and we're good to go. You've already got, if we're on a scale of 1 to 10, Jack Black being there is a 7 already. Like you just need 3 more points.
Yeah, Kate Blanchett, I think, is a great get. Kevin Hart as Roland. I don't know what they're doing there. Like that just doesn't fit at all. But we're gonna see. I wish them all the luck in the world with August 9th, 2024. But I wouldn't hold my breath of that release date. So let's go into some more sad news. The Immortals sequel has been canceled by Ubisoft. This comes from Andy Robinson over at Video Games Chronicles. Ubisoft has canceled plans for a sequel to 2020's Immortals Phoenix Rising. According to multiple development sources who said the game was in development at Ubisoft Quebec, leadership decided to cancel the sequel earlier this month due to, quote, perceived challenges around establishing the IP. This comes months after Ubisoft canceled 3 other unannounced games and shifted focus to their big IPs and live service titles. Sam, how are we feeling? Seems like the Immortal sequel that people were kind of excited for is not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that it's a bummer whenever you see any game get canceled that has been semi-announced. And I think that they had never officially announced that a sequel was on the way, but there was always just kind of like unspoken that this game was successful enough to warrant a follow-up. Um, I also understand the strategy where Ubisoft was having troubles a couple of years ago because they were trying so many different things that all of this money was flowing into these different projects that weren't putting back into the company. Wasn't making money. I think about that battle royale they made. It was like Hyperscape, I think is what it was. And things like that, where they were chasing trends and not really delivering on what they needed to do. And so Immortals Phoenix Rising was somewhere in between, where it was kind of like a kiddie Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but also brought in some unique Zelda elements as well. Like, it was trying new things, but it didn't necessarily land and nail enough to give it a sequel, I guess, in the long term. But as somebody who never played Immortals Phoenix Rising, I'm not deeply tied to it. I love the focus on what's working well, like pour more into diverse Assassin's Creeds, like what we see with Mirage in comparison to Odyssey, more of that kind of these different style games in IP that we know are going to be successful is where I'd like to see the focus shift.
So I'm not Ubisoft's biggest fan. In fact, some people would say I'm their number one anti-fan. The amount of crap I talk about Ubisoft, but Immortals was actually one of the games I tried from Ubisoft. I got it on a deep discount, and I was like, all right, I think it looks interesting. I'm not a fan of the open world Assassin's Creed. I'm not a fan of any Assassin's Creed, to be fair. And I wasn't really drawn to the new Zelda game. So everyone's like, why am I playing this game? I gave it a shot. I actually really enjoyed the story of Immortals Phoenix Rising. And I always said, if this was a linear game, without all the open world Ubisoftness, I think this game is a lot better. I know people liked it, but at the end of the day, this was very much as you described it, Zelda meets Assassin's Creed. Like, you see that they kind of just made this a Ubisoft formula game, a Ubisoft Assassin's Creed game, and reskinned it to make it more Breath of the Wild inspired, gave it a different sort of story. But the thing that excited me about the possibility for sequels in this franchise was that they were going to explore different mythologies. Like, we had the Greek mythology for the first one, and I would love to have seen like an Egyptian mythology or just different civilizations where we see those gods and see what they could do in there, because I think there's a lot of promise there. Mythology has always been something I'm really interested in, and I was hoping that maybe they would get rid of some of that open worldy sameness, especially because they're like, okay, we have other franchises that we can do that in. But it sounds like they just didn't have faith that people were going to be drawn to this IP going forward. I thought it sold well enough, but it really does seem like they're more, we need to make money. We need to just go with what we know is going to give us that cash influx.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there's strategy there where you can do different things in the IP that already exist and that already are successful. Like, I was talking about the Crew earlier, where it's not chasing 2006 Need for Speed games anymore. It's going after something like a Forza Horizon, where it is an open world racing game that might be more akin to what people want in today's day and age. With Assassin's Creed, again, trying the old school versus the new school. You've got the big RPG versus the action game, and they could bake the elements that were going to be in the next Immortals Phoenix into something else. I'm thinking about like Prince of Persia. Like, it would be really cool to see a Prince of Persia game in the future in the style of Immortals Phoenix Rising. There's cool stuff you can do that you can kind of guarantee more success rather than just starting from scratch from the get-go. But I totally understand what you're saying there. And like I said, the people that are working on this, I'm sure that are bummed, or I'm sure they are bummed that they aren't able to show their work to the world until it gets leaked in like 2026. And then we get articles about like, this is what could have been.
Yeah. And we're all like, oh, Ubisoft, what are you doing?
That's what'll happen.
Yeah, sucks for the people over at Ubisoft Quebec that were making this, but Ubisoft is a company at the end of the day. They gotta make money. So look forward to 16 Assassin's Creed games coming soon.
I'll buy them all.
You and my brother supporting them single-handedly. That's all the news stories for this week, but we got some listener questions. So if you want to submit questions for the show, you can do so in the Discord, or you can tweet at us at Twitter at SaveGameMedia. Just like Kyle did. He says, are games becoming more dumbed down, especially in RPGs? Games back in the day had complex systems, side quests that branched the entire game, systems that required you to think about how you're playing and the best way to proceed. Puzzles are becoming so simple a baby could solve them, or they just tell you the answer. Looking at you, Forbidden West.
I think that I think it's really interesting to call out for Forbidden West because I know that was a big controversy of Aloy's over here. Like, I wonder if I moved that rock to the right a little bit, and like they tell you how to actually get through it. But I think that I think that yes, games potentially are getting more dumbed down, but I also think that that is because of how many games are coming out. And I don't know if it's a reflection of my personal life, but I don't have as much time as I used to have. And so going in and being stumped on a puzzle for 45 minutes, not really my cup of tea. And also, developers might be very well aware of the fact that people are probably going to Google this anyway. So why would I, spend all this time making this complex, Peter Molyneux level difficult puzzle
Mhm.
whenever we could throw some complexity in there enough to kind of get the gears turning, but not enough to really stump them. I think that might be a part of it. But um, yeah, it's tricky. It's a weird dichotomy of 400-hour RPGs that are also pretty accessible. Like the games haven't gotten any smaller; they've just gotten easier, I guess. And there's more content. I don't know. What do you think?
I think there's some truth to this statement that games have become more dumbed down. But I also think that it's simply because there's, as you said, there's a plethora of games that come out. Like we used to go like a month without new releases. Now there's new releases every single day to a varying degree. Like there's so many games being released on the storefront at any given time. It's no longer like, oh, this is the game I'm going to be playing for the summer, like the whole summer on the NES. Like I'm going to play this and then I have nothing but time because there aren't other games that are coming, aren't other games that are going to take my attention away. So like the puzzles could be more intricate, more complicated. You'd have to take time to figure them out. And we didn't have the internet back then. Like in the 90s and the early 2000s, like the internet was still coming of age and we didn't have the answers to everything at our fingertips when the game came out because reviewers have like intense review teams and guide teams already tearing the game apart every instance that they possibly can before it even comes out to the public. So I think this is a response to the change in the economy of games and also the player habits, because like you Sam, what you were saying, you're not a fan of puzzles in games. I've heard this sentiment from so many people. They don't like puzzles. There are puzzle games specifically, but that's not what most people want in, say, an RPG or an action adventure game. Like they want the other gameplay that comes along with it. I fall more in the camp of when I notice games are dumbed down the most is JRPGs. If you look at JRPGs from the early 2000s, even kind of into the later 2010s, dungeons were puzzles. Like, oh, I have to collect all the little shadow figures and bring them to a specific area, and that'll unlock. I have to do block puzzles or whatever. Like, there were dungeons with puzzles. Now, JRPG dungeons, for the most part, are hallways that you just run down and maybe hit a switch. So I've seen a very clear shift from every sort of genre across the board that like our players don't really want puzzles. And when we design these types of things, we should make them very simple so they can get back to the gameplay.
Yeah, I think that an example that comes to mind for me recently is Star Wars Jedi Survivor, where the puzzles aren't necessarily complex. And I enjoy a puzzle in a game, but you've got about 10 to 15 minutes of me fiddling around and trying to figure it out before I'm like, all right, I got to go to bed in an hour. I'm going to Google this thing. We're going to look it up on YouTube and we're going to get through this so that I can get to the next boss fight or
Mhm.
the next, little troop of stormtroopers that's waiting for me on the other side of this door. So I think that it is definitely a big change, and especially like you said, I'm not a big JRPG guy, but in my mind, the complexity of those games and the difficulty of them is kind of like a trademark hallmark of what the experience really should typically be bringing. So I think that some genres are going to feel the impact more than others, and JRPGs are definitely one of them.
Yeah, I would say that I think there are games that are taking this to an extreme, and you can tell that maybe they've been a little over-tuned. And Sony first-party games, I've called out for having this problem as of late, like Ragnarok, Forbidden West is a good one. Like they tell you the solution as soon as you walk up to it. And I was like, why even put it in the game then? Like you haven't given me a second to even think like, oh, I should freeze the geyser over there. Thank you. You know, it would have been helpful if you had let me just survey the area for 5 seconds before you blurted that out.
Yeah.
There are games that I think do it well, like a Plague Tale Requiem. I thought she didn't immediately give you any solution. I can't off the top of my head think of when she told me it. Apparently, if you do get stumped, they will give you hints at a certain point of like how to solve certain puzzles. But there are games that know how to balance, like we got to help the player and we also need to not make the puzzle so hard that nobody's going to figure this out, right? Like I do think games are getting dumber though, and that's just it's just where the gaming culture is at, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that a Plague Tale, I think one of the best features that kind of meets the player in the middle between these two endpoints is I think with a Plague Tale, you get a prompt that says, do you want a hint or something along those lines? And so I think that might be a good middle point where keep some of the complexity, maybe not as much as there had been back in like 1998 or whatever, whenever these big games were coming out, but give players, like you said, time to kind of think through things. Because I know for a Plague Tale, a lot of it was I literally just missed where I'm supposed to fling a rock and knock down a platform or whatever. And so I would wander around and there was a sense of satisfaction whenever I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot. It's right there. And then you continue on and you've overcome this like admittedly really easy obstacle. But I think that giving players the option to get the hint is probably where the middle point needs to be.
You know, Insomniac is an interesting developer when it comes to puzzles because they give you the option to skip them altogether. Like I know Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, it's like, do you want to do this puzzle? If not, like we'll just skip it for you and you can go to the next story beat. And I was like, that is incredibly interesting way to do this. I personally not a fan of it because I think it kind of like takes away from the game experience, but I understand that there are going to be players that will use that feature.
Yeah, I'm cool with options too. I think Ratchet and Clank is one where it hits you and I, where we probably played some Ratchet and Clank games back in the day, and it's a nostalgic thing. But also, I'm sure there are like 6 and 7-year-olds also playing this that might not want to play through this stuff, or people that are older and just want the story to go back to the roots. So I think it's all about options. You know, let players play the game how they want.
All right. Well, we'll go to Thrack next, who says, what chances are there, you think, of Xbox bringing back the backwards compatibility program for Activision games? We could get most of the Crash and Spyro games brought up, as well as some other gems that please fans. I know I would love it. So what do you think? Are they going to bring back some backwards compatible games?
Man, I would love this. If it is possible, I think that they absolutely should. Will they? I mean, anything is on the table at this point. Whenever they put out that blog post where it's like, we want to thank you guys for your support of the backwards compatibility program, they probably didn't think that they were actually going to be closing the deal on Activision Blizzard at that given point. So I would love to see these older games come back, especially, you know, it'll never happen because music licensing, and I know it's a pain, but man, backward compatible Tony Hawk games. I made a video in like 2014 asking for backward compatible Tony Hawk games. I would literally lose my mind if I could finally pop in a copy of like Underground 2 on the original Xbox and all of a sudden it just works. God, that'd be great.
I think that we will get some. I'm confident that some of the licensing, now that they own them, will be sorted out. I don't think it's the games people are going to want, though. I don't think it's anything like we're not getting the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games. We're not getting Ultimate Spider-Man. We're not getting those type of games. We'll probably get some Activision, maybe some older Crash games. I mean, we know a lot of the Crash games, so maybe some of the older Crash games they can put on Spyro games. I don't know about Tony Hawk. I think that's kind of a mess.
I know we talked about Singularity last week. Like, I think Singularity is a good example of the kind of game you could probably see where it's not big and well known, but it's cool and it's neat to see it get added to the service. I think that's probably what you'll see the most of.
I agree. All right, let's go to Taylor. He says, while it isn't our podcast, the Xbox Drive just had its 300th episode. Yes, they did. I was a guest on there celebrating with them. Lovely folks. Congrats over to our friends Sean and Ryan at Carpool Gaming. But He says, just had his 300th episode where you and a number of other indie content creators, I
I
like it,
like that. I like that.
gave their 3 favorite original Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Series X and S games. Let's have Sam go through his gauntlet of picks. Are there any OG Xbox or 360 games from all those lists you, Kevin, haven't played but want to try? I'm going to tell you right now, Taylor, I don't remember what everyone else said, so I can't really answer that part of the question. I don't have a list of every game that was listed on the 300th episode, but I will do the first part. We can have Sam do his 3 favorite original Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Series X games. If you're ready to shotgun that off the top of your head, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I scrolled down a little bit earlier and I was trying to think through it. So, like, original Xbox, I mean, obviously Halo, like the original
Mm-hmm.
Combat Evolved. We got Project Gotham Racing just because I like racing stuff. I would also say, I think it was the original Xbox. I know there was a 360 version as well, but Simpsons Hit and Run, I think it
Yeah,
was either that or the,
that's an
yeah,
Xbox. Yep.
it was either that or the other Simpsons Hit and Run style game that came out. But yeah, so those would be my 3 picks for the OG Xbox. For 360, I mean, we've got to go Halo 3. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to say COD 4, Modern Warfare, just because that was like fundamental to what it was. And I mean, gosh, if we're talking third party, the options are limitless, but I would say maybe like Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag
Okay.
might be one that I bring up just because it was such a really good Assassin's Creed game. But I mean, there are so many to pick from
Mm-hmm.
that generation that are fundamental to like what we have today. Um, Xbox One, Sunset Overdrive, obviously got to throw that in there. I would say Forza Horizon 4 is really, really good for the Xbox One generation. Um, does the Master Chief Collection count? Just
I think
because
so.
like it's such a good compilation that built out what modern old school Halo looks like. I think that was a really good pick for the Xbox One. And then for Series X, Tetris Effect Connected, 100%.
Ooh,
One of my
okay.
favorite games of this generation.
Wow. All right.
Um, Beyond that, let's see what my next favorite game would be. I mean, I guess I've got to give it a Halo Infinite because I've spent so much time with it. Like I love the multiplayer
Mm-hmm.
of Halo Infinite. And then I'm trying to think of a good big third party game that I got really into towards the beginning of the generation. I mean, maybe like Assassin's Creed Valhalla would be up there just because it's such a really huge RPG that I spent a ton of time with. But I mean, the hits keep coming. I mean, is Game Pass an option? Like I play whatever's on there. So yeah, I played more games this generation by far than any other at this point in the generation
Oh,
comparatively.
I think I've
So
played more games in these 3 years than the entire Xbox One generation combined,
oh yeah,
and maybe three. I played a lot of 360. I feel like I played a lot of 360 games, but I might have been. I played a lot of hours in certain games on the three, like Call of Duty. I put hundreds and hundreds of hours
totally.
into. So like when I think back, I'm always like, oh, I was playing 360 all the time, but like how many games that I actually play? I don't know. Like probably not as much as I'm playing these days.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking back to about the Xbox One. Like I totally overlooked Red Dead Redemption 2, games like that, you know, that are just so good. So Xbox One's got more games than we realized just from third parties. But I think those are
Mhm.
my picks so far for the sake of time. We could we'll put 2 hours on the books next week and we'll really get into it.
Those are some good picks. Different than what I heard on the Xbox Drive, and certainly different from my picks. But Taylor, make that what you will. But we'll keep rolling. Terabo in Discord said PlayStation is now focusing on live service games. It wouldn't be fair to say Xbox is sticking to what core gamers want, as they have a lot of live service games like Fallout 76, Grounded, Minecraft, Sea of Thieves, World of Warcraft. He includes Call of Duty, Diablo, etc. But do you see them looking at this model more, or are they content? So he's got a few questions here. So first of all, he wants to know: do we think Xbox is going to continue their live service push?
Yeah. I mean, I think that Xbox is of such a scale right now where they don't have to focus on one specific thing. They can do the live service games with Halo Infinite, with the Forza Horizons, with you know, you mentioned them, the the Groundeds, the Fallout 76s that just keep the content coming. I mean, Sea of Thieves is on what, its 14th year, like it just keeps coming. So I'm kidding, by the way. I know it's not actually 14 years old,
It feels
but
like it.
yeah, it feels like they've just been going forever with that. So I think that they're going to continue the live service stuff, but I think then you'll start to see them shift towards like, what does Starfield look like in the future of that game? Is it going to be considered a live service game technically, or is it going to be something that's just kind of static and then it gets DLC like the old days? Avowed is one that comes to mind. You look at all these games that got revealed during the direct a couple of weeks ago, but a lot of those feel like they could be single player games that aren't
Mhm.
necessarily live service. So I think it's a blend of both, but I definitely don't think they're going away by any means.
I think Xbox last gen was more focused on getting a live service game, getting those initiatives off the ground, opposed to Sony, who was very much were the single player, third person, over the shoulder style games, the cinematic narrative games that people like. And now we're seeing Xbox kind of react and PlayStation react, where Xbox is like, okay, we need those type of games on our platform, but in the Xbox style, which is why we're seeing a lot of Western RPGs. We're seeing different style single player games, as we saw at the showcase, come over to the Xbox platform while they're maintaining their live service. Their live service games aren't going anywhere. I guarantee you, like Contraband is one that's going to be a live service game that we know is in development. We know that they're working on that Project Dragon with IO, which is going to be a live service game, right? So their live service initiative isn't going anywhere. PlayStation's just trying to catch up because they haven't had any live service hits from first party. They have a plenty of third party live service game like Genshin Impact, making them billions of dollars over there. So they want an internal studio to make a game like that for them to, especially with Call of Duty and this 10-year deal. Like they're going to be pushing even harder now, I imagine, for the live service games. They're not going to abandon their single player audience because that's what got them to where they are, and I think that's still their bread and butter. But it is now, both companies recognize you kind of need both to succeed.
Yeah. I also, on top of that, thinking about who is the audience for these games that they're trying to build, and is it PlayStation building live service games that people are going to flock to, or are they going after the Call of Duty audience, especially now
Mhm.
that Microsoft is owning Call of Duty here in a couple of weeks? And do players like, do people want to play Call of Duty, or do they want to play Marathon, or do they like, I feel like a game like Destiny that comes out and it's a successful live service game to last for 10 plus years is kind of like a diamond. Like, you don't find them
Mhm.
very often. So I think to set out to make one, I mean, you've got to try right out of the bat and know what you're shooting for. But I think it's going to be really hard for anybody to, I mean, including Microsoft, to make a new big live service game that even is on the level of Apex Legends or something like that, where it's based on the bones of what is essentially a Call of Duty spinoff in Titanfall functionally. Yeah, a lot of different areas of that to break down for sure.
Yeah, which is why I think with the Activision Blizzard acquisition, like they're going to have the mobile live service initiative with things like Candy Crush. They now have Diablo under their belt. They have Call of Duty, so they have established live service games that automatically are like, we don't really need to worry about the live service initiative as much, which is why I think they're kind of investing more in their single player games.
Yeah. You don't have to make a Call of Duty killer if you already own Call of Duty, so you
Yeah.
can focus on doing other stuff.
All right, he's got two more questions. He says Sea of Stars is arriving on PlayStation Plus and Game Pass day one. The only service it's not arriving on is Nintendo's. At some point, does Nintendo need to consider the subscription model?
In my opinion, no, because they're still printing money. Like, would it be great to see everybody get Sea of Stars on day one? Sure, that'd be awesome. Put it on Amazon Luna. I don't care. The more people, the merrier.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, Nintendo's crunching those numbers over there. They don't have to worry about even considering a subscription model because they have Super Mario Wonder coming out in a couple of months, and that's going to make more money than Game Pass probably made in the last 3 months combined on day one. So I think that Nintendo is always going to be over in their corner doing their own thing. And the fact that you even have a subscription model that bakes in old school games at this point is a miracle in and of itself. I think that they'll
Hmm.
probably get functional voice chat maybe in 2027. We'll see what happens with that. But no, I don't think they're going to be doing it anytime soon.
No, yeah, I agree. Would I love them to get a subscription? Yes, I would, because it would probably save me some money, because I only Switch is my exclusive machine. Like it is only for Nintendo first party. So if you're telling me there's a service I could subscribe to and just get their first party releases throughout the year, that sounds great to me. Like it'd probably save me some money. However, you have things like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet selling 10 million copies in 3 days. You have Tears of the Kingdom selling 10 million copies in 3 days. Like they have no need for a subscription service. They would be losing money because they have probably the most loyal fan base out there. Like the Switch is sold gangbusters. Their games sell gangbusters. Like Animal Crossing almost like half of the Switch owners have Animal Crossing. That is ridiculous. The attachment rate for games on Switch is insane. And then they never go on sale. They're like, our games are worth $60, and that's what they're going to stay forever.
Yeah.
And it works for them. So I don't know why they would change it.
I think also we're talking about the Nintendo audience too, and there are definitely people like you and I that would love a subscription model. But also, I know a ton of people that just have a Switch and they just play Nintendo games, and they're
Mhm.
totally cool spending 60 or 70 bucks when the games come out because that's all they want. They don't want to experience these indies. They don't want to check out anything other than like your Animal Crossing, Zelda, your Mario, things like that. So I would. I'm sure they're doing surveys, and I would not be surprised if the results of those surveys showed that people just don't really have a desire for it in the way that we might think they do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree for sure. Last question from Terabo. He says, we know the positives of subscription services like Game Pass. What are the negatives that could occur in the future if this model really takes off? For example, one negative of the acceptance and popularity of digital media is we now have less say and ownership of our games.
I mean, I think that's the biggest drawback for me is that as these subscription models take off, one of the benefits is I get to play way more games. Ultimately, I am owning fewer games right now physically. And if I do want to own them physically, I've got to go out and buy them on top of the subscription. So I'm really spending more money than I
Hmm.
probably would if I had just gone out and bought them. But I'm also somebody who leverages this subscription to its fullest and plays everything that I can. So I think that the rise of subscriptions is similar to and kind of in lockstep with the rise of digital media, where in 20 years, we're probably not going to have discs like in general. I do not see physical games being a thing. And then you have situations like what's happening right now with Ubisoft. We didn't talk about it on the show, but for Uplay accounts that haven't been used in a specific amount of time, even if you own the games on Steam, you are still losing access to them. Like your
Oh,
licenses,
what?
yeah, your licenses are expiring if you haven't used your Uplay account that those games are connected to. So that kind of stuff is horrifying.
Hmm.
And also on top of that, like it locks me into this library of games. And I know that Xbox is good about keeping cloud saves in perpetuity. Like before Game Pass was even a concept, I still have 360 saves that I'm pulling in from the cloud. But in the future, let's say that that changes and you have to maintain a subscription to keep all of your cloud saves for these games you've only played through cloud streaming. And then if you don't renew, it's just gone. That sucks. That
That's
would be really,
PlayStation. You
yeah.
need PS Plus. You don't get cloud saves unless you have PS Plus, and then they're gone after I think 6 months if you're not subscribed.
Yeah, see, like that kind of stuff where I put the time in and I've put 300 hours in an RPG, and then all of a sudden, just because I couldn't pay for PlayStation Plus for a few months, I had to, I don't know, buy food, like, stuff like that, where all of a sudden my entire life that I spent all that time on is gone. That's horrendous. So that's one of my fears.
I think besides what you and Terrible mentioned, because I think those are certainly big concerns. The one thing I want to bring up, and I'm sure there are other people, because I personally don't. I've said I don't care if I ever own another game ever again, because as long as I can play it, like once I experience, that's enough for me. But the big negative for me, and I think we've seen this with Game Pass already, is that the subscription services train people not to buy games, which I
Mm,
think could hurt developers in the future. Because one thing I don't like seeing is when people are like, "Oh, this game looks awesome, but I'm gonna wait for it to come to Game Pass." Or
right.
I understand that not everyone can afford to buy games day one. Like you can wait for a sale, completely valid. There are games though that are never going to come to Game Pass. They're never going to come to PS Plus. So you are essentially saying like, hey, your game looks good and I would love to play it, but I'm not going to support you unless you just give it to me as part of my subscription service. And that I don't think is a good mentality to have. I think that if a game looks good that you want to play, like just get it. Just like if you are financially able to, you can get it. Like there are games that I buy day one and then they come to Game Pass 6 months later, and I'm like, okay, like it's fine. Like I don't regret spending the money on it. If a game launches into Game Pass or PS Plus, that's awesome. Saves me some money. I know the devs are getting that money and getting the deal they made. But if you don't launch it into those subscription services, I don't think you should be punished for that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's two kind of ways to look at it. I totally agree. Like if you want a game and you see a good game coming out, I think that it's sad whenever you see people saying, "I'll wait for Game Pass for sure," because like you said, some games just won't come. A couple that come to mind for me that I kind of like fall into that mindset on, or like Atlas Fallen, or
Hmm.
like Immortals of Avium, where I want to play these games. I just don't know that I want to go all in on day one, and so I kind of fall back to I almost treat the Game Pass situation similar to how I would go with Black Friday back in the day, whenever a game launches in July and I want to play it, but I'm like, well, let's take a Far Cry game, for example, with how Ubisoft drops their prices in like 3 months. Do
Hmm.
I want to spend $70 on day one in November? Or, do I want to wait till February and get it for $20 when it's on sale? That's that same mentality. And so I think that supporting developers on games are good, that are getting good reviews. Remnant 2 is a good example. Like I'm sure a lot of people out there are like, I'll wait for it to come to a subscription. You could do that, or you could really love this game and get into it when it's really good right now with so many people playing it and things like that. So there's a trade-off either way, but I definitely see the threat that you're calling out there for sure.
Yeah, that's really the big one I wanted to highlight, and I know there are caveats. Like I said, they're patient gamers that I gotta wait for a sale. Like that's the only way I can afford games. But the people that are like, oh, I could buy it, but I'm not going to just in case it eventually comes.
Yeah.
That's a weird mindset to me. That's something I'm like, I don't know about
Yeah,
that, but.
totally.
That's all we got for this week, Sam. Great show. Love hanging out with you every single week. But where could people find you and your content if they want more?
You can find me over at JamPackSam on Threads. I'm not spending as much time on Twitter, which I think we'll talk about a bit in the post show here.
Mm.
But you can find me over on Threads, YouTube, all that good stuff. On TikTok, Instagram, JamPackSam, posting content throughout the week, talking about the gaming news, and that is where you can find me. I'll be there.
I'm holding strong over on X. X gonna give it to you apparently.
Whoa, it's Xbox Podcast.
Yeah, I haven't made any other social medias. I'm going down with the ship, and then we'll see what happens. But you can find me at the Muffin Mon over there, and follow us at Save Game Media over on Twitter to stay up to date with our latest. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us this week. I'm going on vacation, but I'll be back next week. Until then, see ya.